Prepare for an objective journey into the heart of the legal process. The footage you are about to see remains completely unfiltered and unedited. It is a raw, first-hand account from the front lines of justice, delivered with utmost professionalism and integrity.
Reported acting suspicious. Show me ID.
Suspicious how? My ID is in my jacket. I'm reaching slowly.
Don't reach. Turn around and walk with me.
Officer, you're delaying a federal official without cause.
Anyone can say that. You don't run this gate.
I do. I'm not...
Sir, you need to step away from the gate right now. I'm boarding this flight. What seems to be the problem, officer? The problem is you. You were reported acting suspiciously. It was 7:42 a.m. at a crowded international airport. The boarding announcement echoed overhead, slightly distorted, repeating the same destination twice. Shoes squeaked against polished tile. Coffee machines hissed behind the counter. The air smelled like burnt espresso and recycled air, sharp and dry. Business travelers stood in loose lines, eyes fixed on their phones, passports already in hand. Gate B-17 was busy, impatient, alive. The man being blocked was calm. Mid-40s. Black. Wearing a navy suit that had been pressed carefully but not expensively. A leather briefcase rested near his shoes. His boarding pass was already scanned, the green light still fresh in the system. He had taken exactly 3 steps past the podium when the voice came from behind him. "Sir," I said, "step aside." The airport police officer was younger, late 30s, uniform crisp, hand resting casually near his belt, not threatening, but deliberate. The kind of posture that communicated authority without saying it out loud. A pause stretched between them, thick enough for nearby passengers to start looking up, suspicious how the man asked, turning slowly, keeping his hands visible. The officer didn't answer the question. He repeated the order. "Step away from the gate and show me your identification." A woman in line frowned. A man across the aisle pulled his phone halfway out of his pocket, then hesitated. This was not loud yet, but it was public. The man complied enough to step aside, but his voice stayed even professional. "Officer, I'm late boarding a government flight. If there's an issue, I'd like to resolve it quickly." "Government flight?" The officer's jaw tightened slightly. He glanced at the boarding pass, then back at the man's face as if matching 2 things that didn't belong together. The pause grew heavier. "Who do you work for?" The man answered without hesitation. "The Department of Justice." That was the moment the temperature changed. The officer let out a short breath through his nose, not quite a laugh. "I'm going to need more than that." People say a lot of things when they don't want to be questioned. This was no longer about procedure. It was about belief. Around them, boarding slowed. The gate agent froze, unsure whether to intervene. A low murmur rippled through the waiting area. The man reached into his jacket slowly. Before he could finish the motion, the officer's voice snapped tighter. "Don't reach for anything until I tell you to." The man stopped. Hands open, palm outward. The universal signal of compliance. His expression didn't show fear. It showed recognition. He had seen this moment before, just never from this side of the law. "Officer," he said quietly, every word measured, "I am identifying myself. You are delaying a federal official without cause." The officer's eyes hardened. That sentence landed wrong. Too confident, too controlled. The kind of tone that bruised an ego. "Turn around, sir. We're going to step into the security office until we sort this out." A phone camera lifted fully now. Someone whispered, "This doesn't feel right." The man looked once toward the jet bridge where passengers were disappearing into the aircraft. Then back at the officer. He nodded, not in agreement but in understanding. This was happening, and it was about to become much bigger than an airport gate. To understand why this moment at Gate B-17 unfolded the way it did, you have to rewind long before the airport, before the uniform, before the accusation. You have to go back to a small brick house on the south side of Cleveland, where the man now being escorted by airport police learned very early what authority could look like and what it could cost. His name is Daniel Brooks. He was born into a household where silence meant safety and preparation meant survival. His father worked maintenance for the city. His mother rotated night shifts as a hospital nurse. Money was never enough, but structure was. Dinner at the same time. Homework at the kitchen table. News on low volume in the background, always tuned to stories about courts, crime, and politics. Daniel learned to listen before he spoke. By 14, he had already been stopped twice by police walking home from school. No charges, no apologies, just questions that lingered longer than they should have. Those moments stayed with him, not as anger, but as focus. He decided early that if the system could question him without cause, He would one day be someone who understood the system better than anyone in the room. He earned scholarships, top of his class. Law school was not glamorous. It was debt late nights, case briefs stacked like bricks. He clerked for judges who taught him restraint over rhetoric, facts over emotion. He joined the U.S. Attorney's Office straight out of law school working cases no one wanted. Financial fraud, public corruption, long investigations where victories took years. Daniel Brooks built a reputation quietly. He didn't chase cameras. He didn't raise his voice in court. He dismantled arguments piece by piece until there was nowhere left to hide. His work helped convict organized crime figures. He led task forces that recovered millions in stolen federal funds. He protected whistleblowers who had been threatened into silence. When he was appointed Deputy U.S. Attorney General, it wasn't announced with fanfare. No interviews, no victory speeches, just another office, another security badge, another layer of responsibility. His job required travel coordination with federal agencies, meetings that started early and ended late. He learned to move efficiently through spaces where few people knew his name, and even fewer expected his face, which is why he dressed the way he did at the airport. Nothing flashy, nothing that demanded attention. He preferred anonymity. It usually kept things simpler. The officer who stopped him lived in a different story. Officer Ryan Keller had grown up 2 states away in a town where authority was inherited, not questioned. His father had worn a badge. His uncle had worn a badge. Dinner conversations were about good cops and bad neighborhoods. Crime was something that came from outside, something you watched for. Keller joined airport police after a failed attempt to transfer into city patrol. The airport felt safer, controlled, predictable. He learned to read behavior through a narrow lens. Who looked nervous? Who didn't fit? Who made him uncomfortable? Supervisors praised his vigilance. Complaints existed, but they were brushed aside. Passenger complaints were common, they said. People don't like being questioned. Over the years, Keller developed a pattern. He trusted his instincts more than procedure. He equated compliance with innocence and confidence with deception. When people challenged him verbally, he felt his authority slipping, and he compensated by tightening control. No one ever forced him to confront that pattern. So when Keller heard a radio note about a suspicious male near a federal gate, his mind filled in the rest before he ever saw Daniel Brooks. And when Brooks spoke calmly, professionally, without fear, it didn't register as legitimacy. It registered as defiance. 2 lives shaped by the law. 2 interpretations of power. One moment where they collided under fluorescent lights, surrounded by strangers' cameras and assumptions that had been building for decades. Neither man knew yet that this collision would follow them far beyond the airport. The walk from Gate B-17 to the airport security office was only 40 yards, but it felt longer. Shoes echoed too loudly. Radios crackled once, then went silent. Officer Keller walked half a step behind Daniel Brooks, close enough to signal control, far enough to avoid contact. Daniel noticed everything. The cameras mounted near the ceiling. The reflection of his own face in the glass storefronts they passed. Calm. Composed. Too composed for this situation, some would think. They stopped just short of the security office door. Sir Keller said, face neutral, hands on his belt. I'm going to need you to confirm your identity right now. Daniel turned slightly. He reached into his inner jacket pocket, slowly narrating every movement the way he had taught witnesses to do during depositions. I am retrieving my federal identification. This time Keller didn't stop him. Daniel handed over 2 items. His Department of Justice credential and his passport. The badge was understated, dark blue, gold seal. His photo stared back, unsmiling, official. Keller looked at it for less than 2 seconds before shifting his attention to the passport, flipping pages faster than necessary. This doesn't prove what you said at the gate, Keller replied. People impersonate officials all the time. Daniel nodded once. Officer, my credentials can be verified immediately through federal channels. I suggest you make that call before this escalates further. Escalates. That word landed hard. Keller straightened. You don't get to dictate how this goes. Behind them, the crowd had grown. Boarding had paused entirely. A man in a gray hoodie leaned against a column phone raised openly now. A woman with a child whispered, "Why is he being stopped?" Someone else said he hasn't done anything. The gate agent approached cautiously, hands clasped. Officer, do you need us to delay boarding further? Yes, Keller answered without looking at her. Daniel glanced at the jet bridge again. He knew the meeting he was flying to. National security briefing, senior officials. A delay like this would ripple outward, affect people he worked with, people who depended on him. Keller, by contrast, felt the eyes on him and interpreted them as pressure, not accountability. "You're being detained for further questioning," Keller said, "until we verify your story." Daniel's voice remained level. "Detained requires reasonable suspicion. You have none. I boarded legally. I presented valid identification. You are now violating federal protocol." "That did it." Keller's jaw tightened. His radio crackled as he called for backup. "Security office, now." Another officer appeared from the corridor, older, slower eyes flicking between Daniel and the phones pointed at them. Keller stepped closer to Daniel, lowering his voice. "You keep talking like that, you're going to make this worse for yourself." Daniel met his eyes. "It's already worse. You just don't know it yet." The second officer hesitated. "Sir," he said quietly to Keller, "maybe we should verify the credentials before—" "I've got this," Keller snapped. The crowd reacted instantly, a sharp intake of breath. Someone said, "Wow." The word hung there. Daniel felt it then. Not fear, not anger. The familiar weight of being judged not by evidence but by assumption. He squared his shoulders. "Officer," he said clearly for the cameras, "now I am a Deputy United States Attorney General. I am requesting immediate supervisory review." Silence. Keller's face flushed. He had crossed a line he couldn't retreat from without admitting error. And in front of all these witnesses, error was unacceptable. "Turn around," Keller said. That was the moment the crowd understood this was no longer routine, and that whatever came next would not stay inside this airport. "Turn around." The words were flat rehearsed, delivered as procedure. Daniel Brooks exhaled once through his nose and did exactly as he was told. Slowly. Deliberately. His briefcase was set down beside the wall, his shoulders squared. Around him, the sound of the terminal seemed to recede, as if someone had turned the volume knob halfway down. "Hands behind your back." Metal met skin. The handcuffs closed with a sharp click that cut through the ambient noise. Not loud, but final. The steel was cold, tighter than necessary, pressing into bone. Daniel felt it immediately, the controlled pressure that signaled this was no misunderstanding anymore. This was force applied in public, without urgency, without danger. A woman gasped. Someone said "no, no, no" under their breath. Phones were up now, fully exposed, no hesitation. The second officer looked away for a moment, his jaw clenched. Keller avoided the camera's eyes fixed forward, as if the crowd had ceased to exist. Daniel did not resist. He did not speak. His eyes traced the floor tiles as Keller guided him forward, palm firm between his shoulder blades. Each step echoed. Each sound was recorded. The rhythm of shoes, the low murmur of disbelief. The distant boarding announcement continuing as if nothing extraordinary were happening. They moved past the gate, past the jet bridge entrance, past passengers who had boarded and now watched from their seats through narrow windows, trying to understand why a man in a suit was being led away in handcuffs while their flight sat delayed. Inside the security corridor, the lighting changed. Harsher, fluorescent. The smell shifted from coffee to disinfectant. The door closed behind them with a dull thud that felt heavier than it should have. Daniel was guided into a small holding room. A table, 2 chairs, a camera mounted in the corner, its red light already on. Keller removed the cuffs just enough to reposition them, tightening again. Slow, methodical, not rushed. "You're being temporarily detained pending verification," Keller said, voice formal again, as if the last 5 minutes hadn't happened in front of dozens of witnesses. Daniel finally spoke. His voice was quiet, steady. "Every second you delay verification increases your liability." Keller said nothing. As the door closed, Daniel was left alone with the hum of the lights and the weight of the cuffs. He rolled his wrist slightly, testing nothing, just feeling the imprint forming. In his mind, the legal framework assembled itself automatically. Fourth Amendment. Unreasonable seizure. Public humiliation. Witnesses. Video evidence. Down the hall, Keller leaned against the wall for a brief moment, hand rubbing his jaw. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by something else. Doubt creeping in where certainty had been. He had crossed a threshold. He knew it, even if he refused to name it. The injustice had already happened. Quietly, cleanly, on camera. And there was no undoing it now. The verification did not take long. It never does. Inside the airport security operations office, a supervisor named Linda Morales stood over a desk cluttered with monitors and incident logs. Mid-50s, 20 years in transportation security. She had seen genuine threats, false alarms, and every shade of ego in between. When Keller entered and placed the credentials on her desk, he spoke quickly, already defensive. Passenger claimed to be DOJ, wouldn't comply at the gate. Possible impersonation. Morales picked up the credential and did not rush. She turned it over once, then again. The seal caught the light. Her expression changed almost immediately, subtle but unmistakable. She typed a number into her terminal, not the public one, but the internal line reserved for federal verification. The room went quiet except for the soft hum of servers. 3 rings. Transportation Security Operations, Morales speaking. I need immediate confirmation on a DOJ credential, Deputy Attorney General level. She listened. Her shoulders stiffened. Yes, I'll hold. Keller shifted his weight. For the first time since the encounter began, he felt exposed. The certainty that had fueled his decisions drained away, replaced by a hollow pressure in his chest. He watched Morales' face as the confirmation came through line by line, each one landing heavier than the last. Name confirmed. Active status. Clearance level confirmed. On official travel. Morales ended the call slowly and looked up. Where is he? The holding room door opened with urgency, now not authority. Morales stepped inside first. Daniel was still seated, hands cuffed in front of him, now posture unchanged. He looked up and met her eyes. Mr. Brooks, she said carefully. I am Supervisor Morales. There has been a serious error. Behind her, Keller froze. Morales continued. Your identity has been verified through federal channels. You are being released immediately. She nodded to another officer who moved quickly to remove the cuffs. The metal fell away, leaving red impressions already visible. Daniel flexed his wrists once, then rested his hands on the table. I would like names, Daniel said calmly. Badge numbers, incident reports. And I want preservation of all video footage from Gate B17 to this room. Morales nodded without hesitation. Of course. Keller stepped forward instinctively, then stopped. His face had drained of color. The authority he carried minutes ago had evaporated, replaced by something raw and unmistakable. I didn't know, he said quietly. You have to understand. Daniel looked at him for the first time since the cuffs came off. His gaze was steady, unreadable. That is the problem, officer. You didn't want to know. The words hung there. No anger, no raised voice, just fact. Outside the room, boarding resumed. The plane Daniel had been meant to take was already pulling back from the gate. A missed flight, a missed meeting. Consequences that would ripple outward logged quietly on schedules and calendars. But inside the airport, something larger had shifted. Because now the story was no longer about suspicion. It was about exposure. The first video appeared online less than an hour later. It was shaky, 30 seconds long, filmed from behind a column near Gate B17. It showed a black man in a suit standing calmly while an airport police officer blocked his path. The caption was simple. DOJ official detained at airport gate for no reason. By noon, there were 12 angles. By evening, there were millions of views. Daniel Brooks did not post anything himself. He didn't need to. The footage spoke in complete sentences. By the next morning, his office had filed a formal notice of intent to sue. Federal civil rights violations, unlawful detention, false arrest, interference with official government travel. The complaint cited timestamps, body language, radio transcripts, and airport surveillance logs. Every second accounted for. Every decision documented. The Department of Transportation opened an inquiry within 48 hours. Internal affairs followed. Keller was placed on administrative leave before the end of the week. His badge and firearm were collected quietly, no announcement made, but the message traveled fast through the department. Then the data came out. Civil rights attorneys requested stop records at the airport going back 3 years. Patterns emerged quickly. Black passengers detained at a significantly higher rate. Secondary screenings based on vague suspicion. Complaints that had been closed with boilerplate language. Keller's name appeared repeatedly, always just inside policy boundaries, never quite crossing them until now. Public reaction turned from outrage to scrutiny. Major news networks ran the story. Legal analysts broke down the Fourth Amendment violations frame by frame. Former prosecutors pointed out how easily the situation could have been resolved with a single phone call. Social media flooded with stories from travelers who had experienced similar treatment but never had the resources or position to push back. 2 weeks later, the internal investigation concluded. Keller was terminated for cause. Failure to follow verification protocol. Abuse of authority. Conduct unbecoming. His appeal was denied. His certification was flagged, making future law enforcement employment nearly impossible. The Airport Police Department announced policy changes. Mandatory federal credential verification. Bias training tied to promotion eligibility. Independent civilian review of passenger complaints. Public acknowledgement of systemic failure delivered in careful language, but unmistakable in intent. The lawsuit settled 6 months later. The amount was substantial, enough to force budget reallocations, enough to make headlines. Daniel donated the majority of it to civil rights legal funds and airport oversight initiatives. He released a single statement. This was not about me. It was about what happens when authority operates without accountability. He returned to work the next day. Gate B-17 returned to normal. Flights boarded, announcements echoed. But something had changed. Officers paused longer before acting. Supervisors verified before escalating. Cameras remained where they always had been, but now people paid attention to them. Justice did not arrive loudly. It arrived through paperwork, policy, and consequences. And that was enough. What happened at Gate B-17 was not complicated. It was unlawful. It violated the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable seizure. A law enforcement officer detained and restrained an individual without reasonable, articulable suspicion of criminal activity. Calm behavior was interpreted as deception. Professional confidence was treated as defiance. That is not a gray area in constitutional law. A detention becomes unlawful the moment it is extended without cause. A handcuff transforms it into an arrest. In this case, there was no threat, no flight risk, no crime in progress. Verification was available within minutes. The failure was not technical, it was judgment. This is how implicit bias operates in real time. It does not announce itself. It disguises assumption as instinct. It convinces the person holding power that discomfort is evidence and authority is justification. Once bias frames the narrative, every fact that contradicts it is dismissed as manipulation. For the public, there are lessons that matter. If you are stopped or detained, remain calm. Speak clearly. Ask whether you are being detained and on what basis. Do not resist physically. Do not argue emotionally. If safe and legal record. If you cannot ask witnesses to do so, say names and badge numbers out loud. These details matter later. For officers and agencies, the lesson is simpler. Authority without verification is liability. Ego is not training. Compliance is not consent. A single assumption can dismantle a career, cost millions, and expose systemic failure that has been ignored for years. And for everyone watching this story, the most important truth is this. Daniel Brooks did everything right. He was calm, he was compliant, he was credentialed, he was powerful. And it still happened. Which means the question is not how to protect people like him. The question is how many people without his position experience the same thing every day. Without cameras, without lawyers, without consequences. Justice in this case was real. But justice that only appears when the wrong person is detained is not enough. The system did not change because someone was innocent. It changed because someone had the power to force it to. What do you think should change next? Comment below.
In our unwavering pursuit of the truth, accountability is our highest priority. We challenge those in power by presenting undeniable facts, because the records never lie. Thank you for watching and trusting our investigations.